In this video, we're going to be turning some trash into terrain in 1 hour, or at least that's the plan. And we're going to be turning these Hubba Bubba chewing gum tubes into a terrain classic sci-fi generator. And yeah, I'll be setting a timer. I'll be doing 1 hour, and I'll be trying to go from the start to the finish in just that 1 hour. And I'll actually be making 2 pieces here, so we'll see how we get on this time. So to start with, you are going to need your containers. I'm using Hubba Bubba here. I think in America it might be called bubble tape. Whatever it is, you need these sort of like specially shaped containers. You need to prepare them. And the first thing we're going to do is take off the sticky labels. Somebody in one of my chats once recommended WD-40, and that's what I use. I just spray it on quickly and try and scrape it off. And I'm going to use 4 containers here, but you could in theory get away with 2 containers, and I'll explain why in a second. Then we need to prepare any markings or mold lines that are on these containers. So at the tops and the bottoms, right where the ridges are, they've got these little like indentations and nubs. They're a little bit unsightly if you just left them. So what I do is that there's a little bit of an indentation to one of the ridges. I basically extend that indentation so that that actual ridge looks a little bit narrower. Now I would recommend taking more time here. And then on one half of the containers, it has this sort of like recycling symbol, or I'm not 100% sure what it's for, and it's a little bit of like a raised bit of plastic. I'm going to scrape that off with my knife. Once I've done that, I'm going to sand all of the areas that I've touched up with the knife. Ideally, like, spend more time and get this as smooth as you can, because it's right on the top of your pieces and you will notice them if you don't do a very good job. And then the reason I'm going to make 2 versions here is that the bottoms and the tops of these containers, they're not symmetrical. One half of them has a gap, in which I'm going to use that as sort of looking like a vent. I'm not going to fill it in. And the other half has a like raised extended bit beyond the container. So for the one with the gap, you can literally just leave it if you're going to do that. And the one that has an extended bit, I'm just going to cut that off with a knife. If you're trying to get them both so that they actually look the same, I would recommend that you cut the one that extends flat, and then you maybe add like a little bit of card into the one that has a gap. That would probably look pretty similar. The final thing I do with these containers, where the hinge was, there's a little bit of like soft plastic. I just scrape that off. So I'm just going to pause it there at 21 minutes and 52 seconds. Probably just because I need the bathroom and I want a glass of water. But let's talk about quickly what I've done, and it's not much. I've got my 4 containers split off, trimmed down as best I can. Obviously it's not perfect, like the indentations on the top and stuff like that. It's not perfect. I've only spent 20 minutes trying to get all 4. The next step is to take this, which is like a flexible pipe I got at B&Q, a DIY store. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them, I think, into 3 sections. Cut this pipe in half that way, and then into 3 sections. And that's sort of going to be the thing that like connects them together. Now to cut this, I started off using my normal hobby knife. However, what I was finding is that when I was cutting through it, I wasn't getting perfectly straight cuts. I was sort of wavering a little bit. So I basically just got my hobby saw out. Obviously I'm short on time. I'm trying to do this as quick as possible. It did end up with rougher edges, but it looked fine. So I cut off the ends of this pipe, and then I was like, I'm going to have it in a section of 3 ridges. I end up changing this to 2 because I think 3 would have been a little bit big. So I cut them into sections of 3, and then when they were in sections of 3, I then halved them. Now this pipe, thankfully, in one sense, had mold lines exactly around the halfway point. So I just took my saw, sawed into it at the top so that I got my markings, and then I took my blade and just finished it off because it was quite difficult to saw through with the gap in between. I ended up with many sections of these 3 ridges, which when I like put them all together, I was like, don't really like it. 3's a little bit too many. So I just changed it to 2, and I just did the same thing. Once I got them to 2 though, I went in with my blade and just sort of trimmed any of the rough edges down. Gluing it all together, I think I would probably recommend gluing them straight onto whatever base you're using, and I'll come onto the base in a minute. But I didn't do that, so instead of like measuring it with a ruler or whatever, I got a different cutting mat out. Container's width was about 8 centimeters wide, and that my pipe was about 4 centimeters wide. So I just used my cutting mat to essentially try and line it up in the center, put hot glue on one of the pipe edges, pushed it against one of my generator bits, and then put hot glue on the other side of the plastic tube, and then pushed another bubble tape compartment up to that, and then just rinse and repeat. Now on the first one I make, I do this 4 times, but then on the second one, I decide randomly to just do it 3. I think I just wanted a little bit of visual difference rather than like the same. And I was like, well, actually, I think the one that's on 3 will look better on a non-concrete base, and the one that's longer will look better on an artificial base. For the one that is 4 pieces, I'm basically going to make a rectangle shape, which I do measure here, and it's actually 10 centimeters by 20 centimeters. Your measurements, if you're going to repeat this, will probably vary. I'm using 3mm EPVC, which granted isn't trash or anything like that, but it's a very good material, and I just cut a rectangle out of it for the concrete base, which is what I'm going to have. The advantage to concrete base is obviously I'll be able to put it on any board. Whereas the one that's not going on a concrete base, I literally just trace out like a rough shape around it. You could do a more rectangular shape if you want, but I didn't really want that. And I just cut that out of EPVC. And I bevel the edge as I'm cutting it, just for speed. Don't do this, it's not dangerous, but it's a little bit like, you better cutting it out and then gently beveling the edges. I was just doing it all in like one sweeping motion, trying to get this done quickly. I basically end up with 2 bases. One that's going to be a concrete base for the generator that has 4 bubble tape pieces, and the other one's going to be like a grassy or sandy base for the one that uses 3 pieces. I just use hot glue to then glue them to the base, and then because I'm trying to do this quickly, for the one where I'm going to have like a gravel base, I literally use super glue to put sand on it. Don't use super glue. It's not the best glue here to glue sand to a base. PVA probably is. It just takes longer to dry. So I'm just going to pause the clock at 55 minutes just to have a little chat. This isn't going to take an hour, it's going to take longer than an hour. So at 55 minutes, obviously I'm not going to be able to paint these in 5 minutes. That's just not going to happen. But what I'm going to try and do is, the plan was to include drying times in the 1 hour. We're not going to do that, just to try and get the score down as low as possible. So what I'm going to go do in my own time is spray these black, wait for them to dry, and then we'll see some very quick speed painting. My time right now, I'm aiming for probably 1 hour and, shall we say, 10 minutes? We'll see. Once I've sprayed them in this sort of dark grey black, I then paint them. I paint them both at the same time, but I'll explain here one and then the other. For the one where it's the sand base, where I've put sand on it and I'm going to have it as like ground, I paint the sand brown and then the generator like a dark grey. Now the generator dark grey sort of mixed in a little bit with the brown, giving it like a very gritty grey, which I did quite enjoy. I then dry brush the brown up. So for the concrete one, I cover the whole thing in this dark grey. And then for the concrete floor, what I do is I get some buff titanium, some white and some grey, and I just sort of mix it together, but it's not like a full mix. I want variants of colour to still show through. Take a sponge and just sponge it onto the base. And then for both of them, I take a bit of silver, mix it in with a bit of brown, because I don't know why, I just find that it looks quite nice. And I dry brush the generators in that, but not like fully. It's a very light dry brush. I'm sort of trying to just catch the edge, and I want to give it like the effect of looking metallic without the whole thing being metallic, if that makes sense. And then for both of them, I'm onto the actual generator colour. Now the colour I'm going to do here is blue, but orange is a great colour that I've seen online as well. And what I do is I get my, it's just a medium blue, and I'm trying to paint in the ridges of the bubble tape containers. Due to time constraints and probably lack of skill, this isn't particularly neat. I would recommend taking your time and getting this right. So I do the first colour of blue on all of them as quickly as I can muster, trying to stay in the lines. And then for the object source lighting, I take that same blue and I let it dry first. That's important. You obviously don't want to be dry brushing it while it's wet, because that'll make a mess. I try and do a very light dry brush, and maybe it's too light in this case, but I take that same blue, get a different like dry brush, get most of the paint off it, and I just dry brush it over the ridges. I'm trying to create like there's blue light emanating from this. I've not really done object source lighting, so I'm not saying this is the best way to do it. So once I've dry brushed it blue though, I get a bit of white, mix the white in with the blue because I want it to be the same tone. And I do the same thing in the ridges, except I'm not going all the way to the bottom. I'm trying to keep it more near the top, just to try and create some sort of effect where it's like, it looks like it's glowing a little bit. I am short of time. I'm trying to go as quickly as I can. Then I do the same thing with the dry brush. I just take the same brush, dip it in the same colour, and dry brush it in that sort of light colour, a little bit more towards the centre so it's not emanating as far. And that's pretty much all I do. And then on the one that I've painted brown, because it's like a natural location, I just put on some PVA and whack on some flocks. I actually do like a dark green, a medium green and a light green. And yeah, that's it. Just flopped it. That's finished. Hit the stop. 1 hour, 29 minutes and 23 seconds. In actual fact, looking at it now, I'm pretty pleased with what I achieved. We did 2 pieces in about an hour and a half, which is a technical fail. I did say we would try and do it in an hour, but I think 2 pieces in an hour and a half is fine. Let's have a look at the specific pieces. On the concrete one, I would say it's a little plain. But yeah, it needs probably like pipes and that kind of thing. And I would send you to the way of my friend Dark Matter Workshop. He's done a version of this chewing gum tape thing, and his extra detailing is absolutely amazing. So if you want extra detailing, I will point you in his direction. But stuff just like pipes and little mechanical bits would really take that to the next level. As for the terrain, I really like it. The only bit I don't really like necessarily is the bit on top where I did those mold lines. I can sort of still see them a little bit. If I had more time, I might actually go in with a pure white on top, or like a very brighter blue where the generator bits are, just to give it like an extra bit of pop. But you know what? I'm pretty happy with the one that's on concrete. And it's essentially a very similar story for the one that's on the grass. It looks completely fine. I have no qualms with it. Because it's on the grass, I don't feel like it needs necessarily all the extra detailing. I think it looks sort of a lot more fine plain. I'm pretty happy with that one. Obviously, I still have the same issue with the mold lines on top. That's not something that I can really sort now. But ultimately, I'm pretty pleased with it. It did take me about an hour and a half, which is a technical fail. But, if you just said it's 1 per 45 minutes, that doesn't sound that bad. My goal here is to sort of make terrain easy, and I think sometimes making stuff quickly is easy for different people. If you're maybe like, you don't have the time and stuff like that. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, do make sure to like the video. That really does help with the channel. Thank you to my Patreons and my YouTube members. Thank you so much to you guys. It's really, thank you. I can't even put into words apparently how much that means to me. Yeah, like the video. Have a most beautiful day. Goodbye.